two other co-founders. What we do at Startinev is we enable innovators and startups by providing them with the resources they need, from funding to access to resources, to access to mentors, the whole way that any startup will need. I guess it's been 4 years of doing this now, and we've noticed a few mistakes that founders make, startups make, and so we've been there to try solve that problem and to also bridge the gap between startups and corporates, which I guess has been the biggest problem for the startup ecosystem, especially in Africa. Yeah, that's me.
Nice to meet you. Would you like to share your screen, or are you going to have a conversation with us?
Yeah, we are just going to have a conversation.
Okay,
that's great.
Hello, Maria. Hello, Innocent. It's good to have you today. My name is Tony. Sorry, I had some technical issues, but I think we can start. That was a good intro. Okay, I think we'll just have it as a conversation. I think since we are dealing with the tech field, and most of the people in the tech field want to actualize their own ideas and the growth of startups. So I think this is a very good, it will be a very great session for you to share your ideas with us, and I think most people will learn from you. I think the main topic of today was about cybersecurity risks with startups. I don't know, maybe we can start with that one.
Okay, perfect. I think when we say cybersecurity for startups, a lot of startups and a lot of founders, me included, first, don't take it seriously. We think it's such an expensive affair. Two, unless you're a tech founder, which forms quite a big part of founders, but either way, they still don't take into account the importance of, simple security in organizations. I guess there's that. Then there's a bit of, I'm a startup founder, and just like any other startup, I'm faced with a problem of, I am the accountant, I am the founder, I am the techie, I am the cleaner, I am the guy who does the delivery. I guess so many times we are stuck in that part where we, you get a job, then you're like, oh, let me talk to my lawyer. But ideally, you'll go do the get as you're proposing at that specific time. Then at the payment bit, you'll be like, oh, the accountant will be in touch. It's still you. And I guess when founders think about all of that, they don't see the need to put security as a key feature in their startup, or they're not ready to even invest in any kind of security whatsoever. Just the basics. And I guess that has been the biggest quagmire the last few days, because now we've seen a lot of tech startups come up. Around 80%, 70% rely on APIs specifically in one way or the other. And I guess that just poses one of the biggest issues, because you're a founder, probably a solo founder, you have APIs, I don't know how many of them. You're not able to even keep track of who is accessing what at what time, because obviously there's bigger fish to fry. So I guess that's where it starts. Founders not having the knowledge, one. Two, founders not having the willpower to even invest in simple security, no matter how that looks. I don't know if that's clear.
Yes, it's clear. But the follow-up question would be, then what is the solution if people don't have the cash to invest in that?
I think the solution, and I guess is the simplest solution, has been, do you actually need security? That as a first question. And two, if you need it, at what stage and to what level? Because security has very many levels to it. I think the simple security that any founder or co-founder is able to do. Even, for example, just try to understand simple password practices, simple API integration practices. And I think these are things that any founder can learn without actually having to, go a very long way trying to get a lot of cash or even hiring a cybersec expert. But then I guess the other bit I've seen is being part of a community, being part of a incubator, being part of a venture studio, being part of a startup 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 hub. Because, for example, for us at Startinev, in most of our events, we will have, for example, last event we had, we gave away $500,000 in tech credits per participant. So, I mean, you have Bitdefender, you have $100,000 from Microsoft, you have $1,000 from Google, you have $1,000 for AWS. And at times when you look at some of these packs, they actually remove the need for you to invest heavily in whatever you may be looking at. And I guess that would be the quickest win for any founder who's just starting up, being part of a community or society that actually gives you access to packs, ideally be very expensive. And then on top of that, there is, do you actually need an extra level of security? Because at the end of the day, if you are running a startup and it's heavily reliant, for example, API, ignoring, for example, cybersecurity would be digging your own grave. So there are those bits where you will really, really, really have to go ahead and invest. But generally, for most of the startups we are seeing come up, I guess the first thing is being part of a community where you're able to access packs, and even being part of a community where you find guys are helping each other. I've done a couple of startup weekends in Nairobi, and the idea is entrepreneurship is such a lonely journey. Every founder for themselves, especially in Africa, where I don't think founders have still I yet to believe in collaboration. Founders are still saying, I do my bit, somebody else does their bit, and that's it. So looking at that, I think the biggest win for me and the biggest advice I'd give any startup, be part of communities that help support you, help support your dream, help support whatever you're doing. In one way or the other, you might be able to even conquer some of the very intricate parts of building a startup. And then I think I've seen a few suggestions from my friends who run incubators, accelerators, but then that is always a question of if it's the best way to go about it. There has been this conversation of law being a very intricate part of a startup as well, and you're stuck in, do you pay a lawyer to help you put your papers in order, or do you go ahead and add a lawyer and give them shares? It's neither here or there. At the end of the day, you're a founder, it's a startup, you know what you do best. But then besides that, I think being part of communities that support each other, being part of startup hubs, incubation hubs, venture studios. I guess Kenya has the highest number of incubation hubs in Africa. There are so many. And then they're able to help you by providing resources. And then you have some like Startinev, which go all the way to provide mentors. For example, for Startinev, we've had Dr. Bright as part of the mentors and judges for Startinev. And you'll find that at times I'm in a position to offer my knowledge for free for 3 months to one of the startups. And now that goes a long way in helping these startups now grow and make these decisions faster and at a way cheaper cost. Yeah.
Right, that was a good answer. I also liked how you touched on talking about founders. I don't know if I don't think you said this exactly, but I'm paraphrasing. You mentioned something about them learning about cybersecurity themselves, especially if they don't have the resources to hire somebody. How do you think they'd go about that properly? I know you mentioned community, but you can elaborate.
Yeah, I guess it goes back to the basics of a startup. The other day I was talking to a friend and they were telling me, uh, they were part of PwC for the longest time until they quit to start their own startup. And that's when they realized while they've been part of PwC, they understand running a company from a very high level. They actually don't understand the basics. I'm going to something from person A and get delivered to person B within Y amount of time. How fast can that be done? And obviously fast and efficiently. And looking at that, I think it goes back to startup founders, specifically being proactive when it comes to learning, when it comes to wanting to have the knowledge about something, about a specific topic. There are the building blocks. If you were to declassify a startup into bits, for example, a tech startup, there's a tech stack, there is a low bit, there is a HR, and then there's the R&D, or the basic building blocks of the product itself, whether it's software or hardware. And I guess it's now in the startup founder trying to understand, why do I actually need security? Security, the simple thing. Myself, I've a computer degree, but the last 3 years I've not practiced computer science, but then how it has helped me is now when I'm interacting with these startups, I'm able to know when somebody's bullshitting me, because that's something developers will do every other time. And I guess it's that, knowing the basics, knowing uh, what are the basics of security, what are the basics of cybersecurity, what are the basics of uh, building a startup, what parts do I need, and am I knowledgeable enough that I'm able to solve, simple problems without having to incur cost? Because at the end of the day, most of these startups, it's the founders' money. They're burning their own money. They'll probably take how long? 2, 3, 4 years without ever breaking even, without even ever making a single coin. I have a friend who just made the first sale 9 years later. And you can imagine all that time he was burning his own money, iterating the product every time. He approaches investors, they're like, no, we want this feature. But then what he has done, he's been able to acquire as much knowledge as possible, in such a way that even if he's not able to pay a cybersec guy, when he's implementing some of these things, he understands the basics. He has some basic knowledge. At least he's not left out. He can't say, because I didn't have amount X, I couldn't do this. At least he protects himself from the very least possible way of protecting himself. For example, you can imagine a startup that, for example, the founder doesn't apply, normal password practices, and then he loses the accounts. Ideally that could happen, but if you look at the flip side of it, it's actually stupid, because the basics of, for example, passwording is not something that you'd need a cybersec enthusiast. It's very simple stuff which you just need to learn and practice on a very low level. But then now, as a startup grows, you're able to say, okay, I can at least hire a consultant. I can, attend master classes on a specific, whichever that is, when it comes to actualization of a specific, for example, tech stack. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you. So we've spoken on the importance of cybersecurity and what this could do in terms of knowledge and joining communities. I wanted to ask, what are the risks that you've seen certain startups face in terms of cybersecurity risks?
Yeah, it really varies, because we also in the startup ecosystem in this country is not really big. It's neither here or there. So it starts with, are there even laws that govern how some of these security threats and risks happen? So I think the biggest risk I've seen is how most entrepreneurs tend to actualize what they're trying to work on. For example, obviously, if I was not talking about cybersecurity, in most cases we tell startup founders, when you're building your startup or whatever it is, do the bare minimum, just build. I mean, we will tell founders that you don't have to go for very expensive tech. WordPress is enough, for example, which is right and wrong at the same time, obviously, depending on the solution being built. Now, looking at that further, you can imagine a startup founder who's probably a lawyer. They're trying to come up with a low solution, and now here they are stuck because probably the plugins they used were wrong, the plugins they used were not updated. And I guess that's where it starts. Do you actually understand your product? Because I think there are two ways to look at it. It's not just building the product. That's not the end of the journey. There's building the product, which is okay, but then there is making sure as you build the product, you're not burning yourself. So I think the biggest risk has been that founders actually not understanding what they want and what they're building, even how they're building it, and they end up doing the bare minimum just to be able to launch without having to consider some things. And I guess the one thing that's seen it happen most is when now startups do WordPress. I recently was interacting with a system and I'm asking a guy, there's this feature I was trying and for some reason it's not working. And then they told me, oh, the WordPress plugin wasn't working and they couldn't figure out. And now what had actually happened, somebody had kind of interfered with with the flow of how do I say it? With the flow of information from the tech end to the receiver end. So, and this guy couldn't figure out. So I'm asking him, and he's like, look, in a sense, I don't have enough money to solve the solution. But then I'm like, so, and how have you been doing it? So he told me he went to a random YouTube video, saw how other people had built the solution, and he just duplicated that. And now when the problem comes back, the YouTube video had only had the part of building, didn't have the part where you troubleshoot, and now they're stuck. And I think that has been the biggest risk, not just as a cyber risk, but a general risk. How founders are registering their companies, they're doing it wrong as well. How founders are sharing, very intricate parts of their startups, and you usually say an NDA is enough. Is it actually enough, or do we just go to Google, copy an NDA, business plans, all that, but then the same, I guess, would apply for cybersec, especially for non-techie founders who are quite the majority actually. So yeah, that has been the biggest risk I've seen. And of course, they are attacked and they don't know how to go back. And they millions of data being accessed by the wrong people. And of course, there's a normal one where Kenyans just love using cracked software, and it's not something you can avoid, but then it poses its risks as well in a case where you can't update and you're stuck yet again. Yeah.
Answer that well because I've seen that happen too. I had a friend and I wasn't sure why his website was down. And when he went, apparently some plugins were not updated. And I was like, that sounds like your website had been hacked because it had been down for a while. Everything is running from the hosting and the domain, everything was fine. But when they went to check in the backend, the plugins had some issues. So they had to find a cybersecurity team to figure out what the issue is because even updating it was an issue. So yeah, your example makes sense. Is there anything else you'd feel like we need to know? Because I feel like I've asked the general questions.
At the end of the day, I think it's in understanding and knowing that while a lot of founders and startups founders are seeing the need to build fast, there's no need to build fast and just have stuff that is floating. There's no need to build fast and have something that doesn't work. If you really feel like that bit of security is very key to your your startup, you'd rather invest or even have, a cybersec guy own part of your company. I mean, it doesn't hurt. But then looking at the flip side of it, you don't also want to concede so much defeat. And I guess I've seen a new trend where a lot of startup founders are hiring developers and giving them shares. Does it work? Does it not work? Um, Good side is you're able to do more at a very small fee. Flip side is somebody else now probably even controls part of your company. But then I think the biggest win for any startup when it comes to how you onboard into your team would be having a proper law team, having a proper lawyer who's on call at any given time. I have a friend who's been building a startup for three years. They approached us last year to just, to guide them and help them um, scale, which we've been doing. But then just the other day, the guy calls me and he's like, Innocent, I don't know. My website is offline. I don't have access. So I'm asking them, okay, how come you don't have access? So after a bit of scrutiny, we realized that they had Kosanad with the co-founder, who's now the developer, and the developer decided, you know what, I can't do this anymore, and they had gone with everything. They had the code. This guy couldn't track back anything at all, and that was the end of it. So I think it starts at the structures. How do you actually structure your startup? And then we've been saying while it may look like it's about funding, it's actually not about funding. It's about understanding how soon and how much do you actually want to raise. A lot of people are choosing to raise quickly, and we usually tell startups, you'd rather burn yourself with your own money than raise millions and you're stuck with loans, you're stuck with a product that doesn't work, or you're stuck with people's money, or you're just stuck in a case where the guy who was building the tech has decided, you know what, it's been 1 year of building this, nothing is working, let me step out. And when they step out, they leave nothing with you. And even if they leave anything with you, you're not able to continue from there. So I think that has been the biggest thing we've seen, because at the end of the day, unless you're building with your best friend or somebody you trust or your family, you're probably just two classmates who believe in something, and now you're sitting together on a table saying, "By the way, I think we can do this together." But are you actually able to foresee 10 years into it? How would that look like? And the biggest problem for any startup, when the money comes in, what next? Because I think a lot of people don't foresee that. They don't foresee the part where money actually comes in. They have everything else figured out. How will the product scale? Who will we reach to? Which countries are we opening? Which locations? Where will our offices be? Do we even need offices? But guys just don't want to discuss when the money comes in, what happens. Then the money comes in and it's hell on earth. That's where startups break. Or another friend I saw last week. Was it last week? Yeah, last week actually. He had gotten an investment earlier this year of 14 million. Then the other day the guys come in like, so we were thinking, we don't want to invest in blockchain anymore. So the cash we had given you, you can't utilize a single shilling. So he had only spent like 600K out of 14 million. And he had started building the product, he had things being shipped, had not been paid for, and now he's stuck. He's so badly stuck just because. And when I was asking him, why did you actually go for funding, he was like, because the opportunity was there. While funding sounds nice, while all that sounds nice, if you can build as much as you can without relying on anybody's money, you save yourself a lot of problems. You actually protect yourself from very big failures, some of them which you might never recover from. Because some of these things, there's no going back. Like him now, he has a loan, I guess, of 8 million. He has to figure out where to where to source money. Okay. And then after that, would the product even work after he's done all that? So I think the basics is understanding the basic structure of your startup on all levels: the law side, the cybersecurity side, the product itself, the HR side, who's on your team, who do you talk to, how much do they know in case of failure, where do I start? Because I guess even the security, the key is knowing where to start in case shit goes down, because shit could go down anytime. Do you actually know where to start? And especially if you're running, or if you have people's money in your accounts, where do you start going back from? Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much. I want to hand it over to Tony. I want to ask him if he has any more questions to ask, or the audience can give their input or ask any questions. Feel free. Let me give you the option to unmute yourselves. But Tony, do you have anything to add?
Okay. Thanks so much, Innocent. I find this conversation really interesting. Yeah, because I just find it like it's quite. We are learning both in terms of the cybersecurity risks and both in the sides of how to come up with a startup. And there was one question I wanted to ask. It's about the cybersecurity factor, the risk factor brought about by maybe human error. Or is it, let's say maybe we are starting a startup and maybe we are two developers, and we have maybe to register, maybe we want to sign up for Firebase or maybe Mongo Atlas, or maybe any of those online services, maybe GitHub. Now, there's always, at the end of the day, there's that fear of who has the credentials to this particular service. Maybe if it's the Firebase. And so you want to avoid that. Maybe in the future, you might have maybe some confrontations or some arguments, and you are maybe like, you have that doubt, like the other guy might just decide, let me just delete this DB. So, okay, how can you handle that? Okay, what's your take on that?
It's a very complicated question. One, because at the end of the day, they're a startup. It's probably somebody in their room and they've realized that there's this solution they can build. There's that bit. But then on the other end, at the end of the day, no matter your willingness to build whatever you're planning to build, if you can't control how you build it, it becomes problematic. So, and that's where I started when I said that try be part of a community in whatever way. Because, for example, if you get access to any of the paid services at an extremely low cost, it saves you a lot. But then I guess it also goes to the founder, whether one or many, understanding and having the knowledge of how to actually handle some of these problems. I guess I come across so many startup stories, and I guess that I'll keep alluding to the stories I'm told by startup founders every day. The other day, a founder, for some reason, lost their credentials to their social media pages, and so they are reaching out to me to try help them, and I'm like, how did you lose the credentials? And they were like, oh, there's this guy I hired. I didn't know them, but they said they'd help. And startup founders tend to think if somebody offers to help, you jump on it. So they jumped on a friend, and they were building together. Then this guy, for whatever reason, decided, I've not been paid, or I'm not seeing where this is going. So they took over the social media, and there were no fail safes of any kind. And so now the founder is left in a situation where they've lost a social media page that had around 12,000 followers. I guess founders need to be knowledgeable enough. They need to have the willingness to learn, the willingness to want to be involved in their startups. I know CEO sounds nice, but then you can't compare the CEO of Safaricom to the CEO of a random startup. Not that I'm demeaning the CEO of a random startup, but at the end of the day, you are the fuel that runs that startup. You need to be involved. While the CEO for Safaricom probably just gets reports and signs checks, for you, you need to be involved in every single bit. So if you have social media pages, you need to know the logins and all that. I guess that would be the answer I'd give. Because at the end of the day, everybody else could leave and you're left alone. Do you quit or what do you do? Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I get the point from there. Do we have any questions from the audience? Maybe you can say something on the chat. If you're somebody who is maybe you are thinking of maybe coming up with your own business startup, I think this is the right opportunity. We have the right guy in the room to ask the question.
Hello, Tony. Hi.
Hello, Andre.
Hi, Innocent. I like the conversation. So helpful. So my question is, I came up with an idea to, let's say, integrate most of the things that are already built, just to come up with something new. Let's say like NFTs and all those. But I'm having I'm the lead, but I have two developers, but I'm having problems, let's say, getting tasks done. So what do you think I should I'll actually do to, maybe make sure most of the milestones are reached? I mean, I could do it myself, but getting it from different developers' point of view is actually, I feel like it's a better off plan. So I don't know, maybe you could help me out, figure out how I could make them complete the milestones in time, because it's a big thing. Yeah.
I'll try to be really modest with an answer. Because I guess we've all been there. You have a team and the team just doesn't work, or the team is just however they wish to be. I think most cases when that happens, it's an issue of compensation, or they don't believe in the dream anymore. So compensation, I mean, if you're paying them, if the agreement is to pay them, for example, 40K a month for them to do task A and task B, if they don't do it, there's no coming back. In short, those ones, it can't just work. There are warning letters and all that. But then in a case where you're actually now building a dream together, it's, I guess, going back to the drawing board and starting to ask yourselves, is this the right team? Because I think the biggest killer to any startup is the right team. You could be having the wrong people with you, or maybe you're not giving them them they probably don't even understand what they are expected to do. I don't know how stern you are. I guess a lot of startup founders are also very calm and collected, trying to protect whatever they're building. And that's why I usually tell most co-founders, once you can afford it, don't be the CEO of your company unless you're the best fit. But if you find somebody else you can learn under, it always works. Because personally, even myself, I'm so attached to starting emotionally, and at times I make decisions that could easily work against my wishes. You don't want to push so much because you're trying to protect your company. You don't want people to talk bad about it, so you are like, acha tu niwabembeleze. So but at the end of the day, it's a startup, it's a company like any other, and it's being stern. I mean, if you don't deliver by this time and you don't communicate, these are the repercussions. If I think the other thing I've seen is guys trying to protect problems. So something has happened, somebody's not confident enough to speak up that something happened. They put it under the mat, happens again, put it under the mat, happen again. Then one day it blows up and the startup can't recover. I mean, we are talking about startups which with less than a million Kenya shillings at times, or probably running on zero. The money we make is the money we eat. It's the money that we use to move. Yeah, that would be my answer. I don't know if that's sufficient, but at the end of the day, while it's a startup, it's a company like any other that needs to grow. You need to feed it properly as a founder, but then you also need to give the people around it, the people building it, the right instructions. So, I mean, if you don't deliver the first time and you don't communicate the second time, this is what happens to you. It's done. If it doesn't happen, you're fired or whatever arrangement exists. Yeah, probably that's where you need to look at first. Then on top of that, if it's a compensation case, I mean, if I'm going to pay you to do something and you don't do it, that just means you're not fit for the job.
Thank you, Innocent.
I think I also find yeah, that was a good point, because if there was this series called The Startup, I think maybe most of you have watched, and it's about this girl who builds projects, and at the end of the day, her team, like they push her out and they are left to run the particular projects. I think you guys can watch it. So I think, yeah, the point where the startup founder, maybe you make most decisions, whether you can't be stern, as you say, can also be an issue. And maybe to add something on Andre, yeah, you can try maybe also manage developers with, like maybe, let's say maybe for me, maybe I'm a web dev, and then you assign me a task, and maybe you tell me for this particular month, okay, you just say, Tony, you'll be working on maybe, let's say something like maybe, creating an app for the particular site. And we don't assign like the particular period and let's say by when should I complete the project. So that will also become an issue, because let's say maybe we are having maybe one meeting in a week or one meeting in 2 weeks, if it's online or if you're not meeting. So it can if like I'll get that, like I don't have that urge to finish that particular task. So I think you can also try using tools like Trello, where maybe or Jira. I think Jira is perfect, where like you assign maybe a developer a task, and then you have to put that maybe estimated period. There's another startup that I saw, they use the idea of points. Maybe you have assigned a developer a certain task, maybe you have assigned, let's say task 1, it's maybe creating a Google map. Task 2, maybe let's say maybe correcting the contact page. Task 3, maybe doing something on the backend. So like assign points depending on the complexity. But now, like for that, those ones they were doing, maybe for each point you find maybe they pay, for each additional point it's like a bonus, maybe $10. That was the it was a US company. So I think that can also bring back the motivation. And I think another point is where Innocent was saying, the developers might not maybe be seeing what you are seeing. You can have me on table and like you say, we want to come up with this particular product. But for me, I've not seen, like, you're not making me to say like clearly what's the, how will we rise in this product, or what will be the benefits. You're the only one saying. So at least I think at some point, you can try at least, shine that light to the developers. They get, like, they just feel involved with the particular thing you're coming up with. Okay, I think that's all. I can see a question in the chat from Roy Ford. He says, how does one pitch projects and funds to sustain a team of devs? Like some exceed the budget of project, e.g. senior developers. I think, Innocent, you can see that on the chat. Maybe you can say something.
Yeah. First, I'll add on what you've said about using softwares. A lot of softwares exist, and as I had said initially, if you're part of a community, you're able to access some of these very awesome apps. For example, I know on my end, I've always had AWS credits, Canva credits, Trello credits, Miro credits. So at times you're able to access extremely expensive softwares to manage workflows, to manage your teams for almost zero. In most cases, zero, because, for example, if you're going to get $500,000 in tech credits, those could take you for even 5 years for a team of 4 developers. Yeah, but funding and pitching, we usually say nowadays it has turned to how good your product is, to how good you are as a founder, and how good are you in telling your story. If a 3-year-old can't understand your startup in the first 60 seconds, you're probably doing it wrong. So wrong. So the first thing is to be able to tell your story. If, for example, you're building a startup to help kids move from point A to point B, can you actually address the pain point in such a way it's understandable to a 3-year-old, or to the general mass, ideally. But then on top of that, have your numbers ready, have your pitch deck ready, and as you build a startup, how quickly can it scale? If your startup can't do 1 million users or $1 million in 5 years, you're not on paper, but just as a vision, you're able to say, this is how it scales to do this, and that. It gives you a plus, because that shows that there's a plan to scale. And if I'm going to put my money into your startup, we won't be feeding your local neighbors per se. Because a lot of African, especially Kenyan startups, don't build for more than their community. I have a problem in my community, that's it, and I call it a startup. Yeah, you're solving a problem, but to what extent? Is somebody confident that they can put their $1 million into that startup to scale across Africa? And I guess that's why we are seeing a lot of Kenyan startups, even very big ones that I won't mention, taking years to just grow outside Kenya. So scale. 2, can you tell your story? 3, as a founder, do you know your numbers, and are you able to explain that to anybody? With that, you're able to develop a pitch deck that tells a story. And I guess now I've seen VCs who are telling people when they're pitching their startups, don't come with a pitch deck, come talk to us, because they're starting to also now look at who you are as a founder compared to what your product does. What your product does can always be worked on, but if you're not the proper founder, there'll always be a problem. So I think I've also seen a lot of VCs shift from having startup, from having product as the basis of funding to the actual founders being the basis of the funding. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, great. I hope, Rayford, you got the point. Do you have any other question, maybe from the audience?
One last question, Ton. Sorry. Yeah. So in case I have to, let's say, definitely need devs. In case I have to look for more dev, I'm a dev myself, and the security enthusiast. In case I have to look for devs, maybe you mentioned this and I was in, but what criterions should actually be looking at aside just the skill set and them understanding what actually the dream entails? What do you think I could look up for in case I'm looking out for developers?
Wow, that's a very interesting question, because at the end of the day, you want the best, but in most cases you can't afford the best. So I think for a startup, depending on whether you have funding or not, does somebody believe in your vision, and are they able to see what you're seeing? I'd rather work with a junior dev who understands the vision and who's willing to learn, than a senior dev who doesn't see the vision and just wants to build. Because in most cases, they've had so many experiences, they might end up building what you don't envision. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think what I always advise, and what I've seen also a lot of incubators work towards, is having the right team. No matter how, provided they understand the basics, they are able to grow with you. Because a lot of senior devs, trust me, won't grow with you. I know they've been through Microsoft, Google, and then here you are with your very small startup. Unless they really buy into the vision, there'll always be trouble. So I think that's the very basis. Your team should be able to buy into your vision and help you build your dream. Everything else now becomes an additive, skills and all that are just additions. But at the very baseline, can they actually build the vision if you're not there? And I usually ask most of the founders I come across, if today you are not part of your startup, would your startup crash? And if the answer is yes, then there's a problem. But for example, for some of us, the startups we've built, we know if today Innocent is not part of Startinev still grows either way. Yeah. You don't want an Apple story where people say Apple died the day Steve Jobs left. You want a startup that can actually grow past you, and a startup that grows past the founder, a startup that has a team that actually believes the dream. Skill can be learned, skill can be improved. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Innocent.
Do we have any more questions? I think members you have.
Oh yeah, Tony. Sorry.
Okay.
Innocent. In case, and this is about the in case the vision I have. Let's say in order to build something, maybe the languages we chose, the ones that they're actually familiar with and comfortable with, cannot do can actually attain the purpose. And we figured out that there's a new way we could do it. How would I actually help the junior devs? Because you said I should maybe work with most of the junior devs who understand. How would I help them, curate well with the new way of building what we envisioned? And I myself actually don't even know it.
I missed a bit of that. Please repeat.
Oh, I was asking if the dream I want to build is not in line with, let's say, the frameworks or the language that we want to use or most of us are familiar with, and we've figured out we could use let's say like a new technology, and I don't know it. So how would I help my team actually get to understand how the new technology works so that we can actually fasten up the building process?
Iterate as much as possible. Doesn't hurt to learn. A lot of events happen around us, a lot of workshops. Be part of one, be part of a space where you are allowed to learn. Then after that, you're able to grow with your team, because at the end of the day, if the founder grows and if the founder understands, what they're supposed to do, it becomes way easier. Be part of a community. That's where I think everything is. Then from there, you're able to grow and learn. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Innocent. Okay, do you have any more questions? Maybe I think you have the privilege to unmute. Okay, in the meantime, maybe Innocent, I think you're a good fit for anybody who would want an advisor for a startup. So how would maybe anybody reach you? Do you hold meetings and conferences? Maybe you can tell us about that one.
Hello, Innocent, did you hear the question?
Sorry, I think I was in a place with a bit of a bad internet. Please repeat.
Okay, I was saying, like, think anybody who wants to have a startup, maybe mostly a tech startup, maybe you're the best fit maybe to become as an advisor. So how do we reach you, and do you hold maybe meetings or conferences on such? Maybe you can tell us.
Luckily or unluckily, we just partnered with SheHacks, I guess, for all our events. So anytime there's a Startinev event, probably SheHacks will be part of it and we share. But besides that, I think we are quite available. I'm also quite available, Twitter, Instagram. I can share my number as well. Let me just actually type my number on the chat.
Okay.
I'm quite active on WhatsApp, so. But besides this, anytime starting sees an opportunity, we always share. And I guess that said, I can share one or two opportunities I know that are currently ongoing. I know there are two different VCs. One of them is giving away 10 million Kenya shillings. One is giving away 1 million Kenya shillings in grant funding. So no equity, just external VCs who are willing to grow the ecosystem. I guess I can share that those two opportunities. Let me see if I can access the links to those two very quickly. And if you feel like they fit what you're working on, you can always apply for the same. Let me get the links and share.
Okay, sure. In the meantime, if there's anybody.
Yeah.
Innocent, could you tell us a bit more about the form that you've just shared? I see that it's leading us to a beer garage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I've shared two. Beer garage is what is it? It's they are VCs who invest in startups. The other one is Hindsight Ventures, who are also a VC. They have two different challenges where they'll be training guys on pitching, sustainability, building startups to scale, and guess at the end of it all, for Hindsight, the one for Hindsight, I know the price is $1 million. No, $10,000. Then the one for Beer Garage is $50K. Yeah, it's only that I can't share the posters in the chat. I don't know if there's a. I guess I can send to you, Nancy. Then you can share with everyone else. I have the posters as well. It's only that I could only share the link on the chat. But there are entities who have opportunities for African founders under 35, I think. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your resources with us. I'm sure those in the chat who are interested, please go and apply. It's a really good opportunity. Innocent, do you feel confident enough to close? Should I close the session? Does anyone else have any more questions? When you went to get the links, Tony had asked that, and I see no questions from the guests. So can I thank you and we close the session?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Thank you so much, Innocent. My name is Maria. I usually run social media and facilitate the Zoom meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Nancy wasn't able to make it to this session, but she did speak highly of you. So she appreciates your attendance. Thank you for coming to speak to our community. We really appreciate it. And I appreciate the fact that you are easy to talk to and you answered the questions so eloquently. I thank you again. For those who couldn't make it, if you know anyone else who wanted to make the session and couldn't come, it's on our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel is called She Hacks KE. They can go and catch all the sessions that they have missed and tonight's session over there. I'd like to thank our participants for coming and staying with us for this long. I hope the questions have been answered and I hope the session was interesting enough for you guys. We have sessions on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So if you'd like to come back and get a taste of more information from other guest speakers, you are welcome every Tuesday and Thursday. And if you need announcements, please follow our Twitter pages and our Instagram page, whichever social media platform works for you. But if you have any more questions for me or Innocent, you can text me on the She Hacks Twitter page and I shall answer all your questions. And Innocent has provided his number in the chat for those who would like to speak to him after this. Thank you again, everyone, for coming. I think we can close the session right now.